Welcome back to the channel, and today I'm going to teach you the basics of tuning gears inside Forza Horizon 5. So the first thing you want to do for any car that you've got is you want to go into custom upgrade for your car, go into one of them. I'm in the intake, and you can see the performance graph right there. You can see your power and your torque. So the power and the torque cross over around 5,500 RPM. That is what's called your power band. After that is when you have the most amount of torque and the most amount of power. Your torque gradually decreases, but your power always goes up. So that bit is where you want each gear to start from, because that is when you have the most amount of power in your car. So now we know that you want your car to start after 5,500 RPM. We're going to go in and change the gearing in the car to suit that. Right, so here we are in the tuning section. I've purposely messed about with the gears on the right hand side. You can see it on the graphlet to show you what you shouldn't be doing. So in first, we can ignore first perfectly fine because it goes from 0 to 9,000 RPM. Second, you can see that it's kicking in under 4,000 RPM. So as we're driving, it should be changing gear and kicking in around 5. It was kicked in a little bit higher than what it says on the graph. And then the rest of the gears are way too high. So if we go and test it, I'm on the drag strip, so if we watch the speedo on the bottom right hand corner, we should see it kick into second at around 5,000 RPM, which will be too low in the power band because it's the start of the power band and we want to be much higher than that. We want to be at least 500 RPM into the power band when we first kick into it, and then you'll see the rest of the gears kicking way too high. So if we just go down, so it bogs down in second straight away, and then the rest of the gears are kicking well in above 7,000 RPM. Which is fine for when you're in higher gears, but not fine for when you're building up. I mean, third should no way be kicking in at that speed, or that RPM. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go back into tuning and we're going to adjust it. Now we're in tuning, what we want to do is we want to get every gear inside the power band. Now you need to remember, as the faster your car goes, the harder it gets to accelerate. So each gear needs to start in a higher RPM than the last gear to account for that. So what we're going to do is, first we're going to leave perfectly fine because it seemed perfectly fine. It launched off fine. It went up through the revs perfectly fine. It changed into second. Second, it bogged down completely. So we're going to higher second. Moving the red line on the graph, you can see it's now at 4,000 RPM. We want it to be around 5,000 RPM, which means it should kick in around there. And then third, we're going to higher it again. We want to make third higher than second to make sure it doesn't bog down. Make sure it's in the power band, so we're going to do that a couple of hundred RPM above second. And then fourth, we're going to do the same thing, so we're going to make it higher than third. And then fifth, we're going to do the same thing again. And then sixth, we're going to do the same thing. And then seventh, we're going to do the same thing again. So now you can see I've got a nice arc inside my graph down there. So the last thing is the top speed in the bottom left hand corner, you can see is now 201.3 miles an hour. Well, that's not really any use. I want my car to be faster than that. It completely depends on what track you're driving and whether you need acceleration or top speed. So if you're in a tight technical circuit, then you generally don't need to go that fast, so you could leave it like that. But if you're in a track that has high speed straights, then you want to be going faster than that. So the way you want to do that is you come back up to final drive, which we haven't adjusted yet, and you can lower final drive, which will then push the graph out to the right hand side. It will higher your top speed. See now I'm up to 229.3 miles an hour. We can do it even more, and you can go to the extremes, which now puts my top speed at 256.5 miles per hour. The problem with that is it then makes first gear very long, so it takes a long time to build up your acceleration, but you do get to a higher top speed. You'll just be slower off the mark. So anybody else with a better tune than you will just beat you on the slower parts of the track. Well, that's no use. So what we're going to do is we're going to lower it, and we're going to be in the middle around about there. So what's my top speed now? About 240 miles an hour. That's perfectly fine. So we're just going to go and test this out on the track. Now we're on the tracklet. So if we look at the speed on the bottom right hand side, what we want is each gear to be kicking in around 5,500 RPM per second, and then gradually building up in the RPM per gear as we go up. So we're just going to start off. So first is fine, second, third, and then each one is gradually going up. Look, 7,000 for fifth, and then sixth should kick in over 7,000, perfectly fine, and then seventh should kick in over that, which you can now fine tune it, because I just saw seventh kick in at the same point as sixth, which is no use. The car bogged down a tiny bit. So we're just going to go back into tuning, and then we are just going to adjust it. So if we go over to gearing, so what we want to do is now we want to adjust it, because the higher end gears, it did bog down a little bit, and a couple of them changing it around the same point, which was no use to me. I didn't want that. So first, we want to make first a little longer. So what we're going to do is we're going to lower first and make it longer. See the red line moving across the right hand side. So then second, we're going to move that again, push it down to 5,000 RPM. That's where I want it. So right there on the graph. Then third, I want it to kick in around 500 more. And then fourth, I want it to kick in around 500 more again. And then fifth, I really want it to kick in around there. And then sixth, I want it to kick in a little bit higher. And then seventh, I'll do the same thing right there. So then we're going to lower the final drive. So I'm now top speed of 200 miles an hour. We're going to lower the final drive to push it out. And my top speed is now 226, which is perfectly fine. You can higher it if you have high speed track or if you have a low speed track. This is about in the middle. So we're just going to go back and we're going to check this car. So it should accelerate a lot faster than what the last one did. It'll get to around the same top speed, but it'll get there a lot quicker. So we just flick the accelerator up, watch the speed on the bottom right hand corner. So you can see it now kicking in. Each gear is getting higher. That's what I wanted. The fifth was perfectly fine, and then sixth kicks in at 7,500, which is perfectly fine. Seventh should kick in close to 8. So that, yeah, so I'm getting there a lot faster in that compared to what I was at the start. So that is a general guide to gear tuning inside Forza Horizon 5.